The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen, we have a full show. We have Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison joining us tonight after we saw those Justice Department resignations in Minnesota and in Washington over that ICE killing in Minnesota. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, we finally saw the so-called border czar, Tom Homan, faced with the question of what did you do with the $50,000 in cash that undercover FBI agents gave you? And that's something Senator Whitehouse has been waiting for. And so he's going to join us on that. Jon Ossoff is joining us. It looks now like the Democrats have a very serious chance to win the United States Senate, especially after Mary Peltola announced her candidacy in Alaska. That gives the Democrats enough real chances, enough seats that are really in play that they really could take it back. Ro Khanna is going to join us because he's gotten a federal judge to order the Justice Department to answer why they have only turned over less than 1% of the Epstein files. Ro Khanna wrote the law, as you know, compelling that. And so we have a lot to get to in this hour tonight.
You got a lot. That's a 2-hour show. Well, I'll look forward to watching it all.
I just wanted to tell you what you'll be listening to on the way home.
I will be. I'll be listening on the way home as always.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Thank you. Well, 9 years ago, I asked the question on Twitter, if Trump gets dementia, how will we know? Donald Trump makes a public dementia diagnosis difficult because he is a pathological liar, having been caught telling over 30,000 lies in his first 4 years of the presidency. He's also the most ignorant person in the history of the American presidency, and usually operates at a level of public stupidity never seen in American political history. And so if you mix or together pathological lying with ignorance and relentless stupidity, you will sound like you are in neurological decline all the time, even if you're not. When you throw in a 79-year-old brain, then dementia is one of the very first things you think of when you see Donald Trump on Friday get up from his chair in the middle of a White House meeting with oil executives to turn away from everyone in the room and gaze out a window which he imagined to be the entrance to a building that does not exist, and then stand in that window talking to himself about what isn't outside that window.
I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view. This is the door to the ballroom. How did you unusual time to look?
No, it's not the door to the ballroom. But he is right that it is an unusual time to look at his imaginary ballroom. And so everyone who has seen that, including the oil executives who were in that room, are left to wonder, is that dementia or is that just Trump? That's the person who was trying to convince the oil industry executives to rush down to Venezuela and start taking Venezuelan oil, and he convinced none of them to do that. And the evidence of Trump dementia during the meeting probably convinced most or all of them that Donald Trump can't be believed about anything.
You'll make it back one way or the other. You're all going to do very well. I think really very well. Marco just gave me a note. Go back to Chevron. They want to discuss something. Go ahead. I'm going back to Chevron, Marco. Thank you, Marco.
Was there a question, Mr. President?
Yes, go ahead, Marco. What are you saying here?
Is that dementia or is that just Trump? Imagine what the White House press corps would have done with that if Joe Biden had done either one of those things that you just saw Donald Trump do. Donald Trump went to Detroit today to lie to the audience of rich people at the Detroit Economic Club, telling them that prices are down after a year of inflation holding steady, thanks to Donald Trump's tariffs and Donald Trump's other economic mismanagement. And so I think we can assume his lie about inflation to an audience that knows better today was just Donald Trump's typical pathological lying. He would have told that lie at his sharpest. That particular lie is not evidence of neurological decline in Donald Trump, but it is further proof that you cannot believe anything Donald Trump says about anything. Donald Trump droned through a lifeless teleprompter reading of a speech that appeared to be his first reading of the words that he was speaking to that audience. And at the end, Donald Trump decided, in what could well be evidence of dementia, that the Detroit Economic Club really wanted to see him dance in his 79-year-old way to America's gay national anthem, YMCA, by the Village People, which was blaring away in the nightclubs that Donald Trump frequented when that song came out in 1978, when he was 32 years old.
The United States is winning again, and we're rapidly making America and the great state of Michigan greater and more prosperous than ever before. I want to again thank the Detroit Economic Club. You do a fantastic job, so respected. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Short on your dough, you can stay there, and I'm sure you will find many ways to.
The man just walking off that stage and disappearing into those black curtains after trying and failing to dance thinks he is the acting president of Venezuela. He has publicly declared himself to be the acting president of Venezuela, and that is strong evidence of dementia. And it is a Trump pathological lie, and it is further proof that you cannot believe anything Donald Trump ever says about anything, and I mean anything. Donald Trump says she ran him over. The man who thinks he is the acting president of Venezuela said, quote, she ran him over. She didn't try to run him over. She ran him over. Those were Donald Trump's exact words when lying about Renee Good. Every video from every angle of the killing of Renee Good by one of Donald Trump's ICE agents shows that she did not run him over. And this angle proves that the ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, fired his last two shots at her when she posed no threat to him at all. He is clearly standing beside a car that is moving away from him. It is impossible for that car to hit that man now in that spot when he is firing that gun. That car cannot suddenly go sideways. The decision to fire those shots would have been made only if Jonathan Ross was convinced that the first shot he fired did not stop her. The fact is that most bullets fired by law enforcement officers in the line of duty miss their targets most of the time. But if Jonathan Ross's first shot hit Renee Good, then there was no reason to fire a second shot. And if the second shot hit Renee Good, then there was no reason to fire a third shot. And law enforcement officers are required to assess the situation after each shot that they fire to decide whether to fire another shot. It is not legal for them to just keep firing bullets as long as they have bullets. If the third shot hit Renee Good and killed her, that shot was fired when she posed no threat to Jonathan Ross or anyone else on that scene, as this disturbing video proves.
You just Shame! 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 Dude, what's happening to her? What happened? Dude, you shot her! I'm trying to help! No! You shot someone in the face!
There was no apparent injury to Jonathan Ross. On that video, you see him walking all the way down to the car after he has fired the deadly shots. And you see him walking all the way back, no limping, nothing, no hint in any of his movement after the fact that he was injured in any way, not injured in the slightest, no hint of that in that video. It was mass resignation day in the Trump Justice Department today from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. In Washington, 6 members of the Civil Rights Division of the Trump Justice Department quit. MS Now's Carol Leonnig and Ken Delanian report, quote, top leaders of the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division have left their jobs to register their frustration with the department after the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, decided not to investigate the ICE officer's fatal shooting of Renee Good last week. The criminal section of the division would normally investigate any fatal shooting by a law enforcement officer and specializes in probing potential or alleged abuse of improper use of force by law enforcement. So the most experienced lawyers in dealing with incidents like this at the Trump Justice Department are not being allowed to participate in the investigation in any way. And in Minnesota today, another 6 attorneys have quit the Trump Justice Department in the U.S. Attorney's Office there. The Minnesota Star Tribune reports that, quote, a majority of the leadership team at the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office resigned on January 13 over the direction of the Justice Department under the Trump administration. Among those who resigned was Joe Thompson, the lead federal prosecutor and public voice on uncovering rampant fraud in Minnesota. Joe Thompson is a 12-year veteran of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota and has been leading the fraud investigation in Minnesota that Donald Trump claims is the reason he sent thousands of federal agents to Minnesota in what our first guest tonight calls an invasion. The Minnesota Star Tribune reports, quote, the departures of several prosecutors stemmed from directives from top federal officials to staff members after the killing of Renee Good by ICE agent Jonathan Ross, according to sources familiar with the decision. That included blocking the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension from the investigation into the shooting and a request from the Justice Department to investigate Good's widow for possible federal charges. Governor Tim Walz, whose state government has been the focus of Joe Thompson's fraud investigation, said, quote, Joe is a principled public servant who spent more than a decade achieving justice for Minnesotans. This is a huge loss for our state. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said, quote, when you lose the leader responsible for making the fraud cases, it tells you this isn't really about prosecuting fraud. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison has now turned Kristi Noem into a defendant in the case of Minnesota versus Noem. The Attorney General, along with the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, are suing the Department of Homeland Security to stop what Attorney General Ellison calls the Trump invasion of Minnesota.
The deployment of thousands of armed mass DHS agents to Minnesota has done our state serious harm. This is, in essence, a federal invasion of the Twin Cities and Minnesota, and it must stop.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. I want to begin, General Ellison, with your reaction to what you saw in the U.S. Attorney's Office today in Minnesota and the Civil Rights Division in Washington.
Well, the first thing is that we still have the precious life of Renee Nicole Good that needs to be investigated. And if the most experienced federal lawyers are not going to be involved because Harmeet Dillon and Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi have said they wouldn't be, and if they're still denying state investigators access to the file, then how is Ms. Good's case ever going to be investigated? The feds won't do it, and they're denying the state access to the file. So that is deeply concerning. Now, look, it turns out that prosecutors have ethics, principles, morals, and there's and the Trump administration has crossed the line with them, so they had to walk. This is what any principled person would do when they were confronted with a moral quandary that they simply could not engage in. They had to walk, and I commend them for it. I can tell you that for the difficulties that we're having with the federal government in Washington, we work quite cooperatively with federal officials in Minnesota, whether they're at the U.S. Attorney's Office or whether they're at ATF or even the FBI. The calls to basically shut down this investigation are coming from Washington, not Minnesota. And it sounds like even people in Washington are saying, we are here to investigate cases exactly like this one. If you will not allow us to be involved in this case, we cannot remain here. And I'm saddened by it, but it really speaks to the fact that the federal government is covering up a death investigation. And that's pretty sad.
So in a shooting like this, the three most important evidence sources are, of course, the body and the autopsy report that is produced from that. Secondly, the gun. And thirdly, the car. The FBI has the gun. The FBI has the car, as I understand it. But the county, state of Minnesota, the county has the body and is in charge of the autopsy report. Will we see the autopsy report?
You know, let me tell you, all bets are off nowadays, Lawrence, but I think the answer is yes. But that's what I'm pushing for. That's what I believe should happen and will happen. I hope not to come to your show and say, I thought so in good faith, but the federal government did something to prevent it. But my understanding is, yes, we will, that information will be forthcoming. But the shell casings, the gun, the car, whether or not there's been a toxicology test for Jonathan Ross, which is standard. Those kind of things are in the possession of the federal government. And quite honestly, if we're doing things anywhere close to the right way, they have essentially declined prosecution at this point. So open up the file and hand it and let the state get access to it so that we can do our investigation. The state has a right to investigate this homicide. And now the federal government has decided that they're not going to pursue it. So they should hand the file over. And I think that's just logical. And I would wonder why they wouldn't do that since they declined.
If there's a Minnesota grand jury investigation, would that have the power to subpoena the gun from the federal government, or subpoena the car, and subpoena whatever is in possession, any evidence that's actually physical evidence in possession of the FBI?
I say yes, but understand this, Lawrence. That's probably going to be a thorny legal issue to sort through. Because logically, the federal government has declined the case at this point. They should hand over the file. But what if they don't? And there have been a lot of unorthodox, unprecedented things that have happened. If they don't, then we're going to have to get a judge to make them release it. And does a court have the authority under separation of powers to tell the executive branch to release information? I mean, I suspect we'd have a court battle over it. But my position would be that the state would be entitled to it.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And coming up, Donald Trump's so-called border czar, Tom Homan, finally faced the question, what happened to the $50,000 in cash FBI undercover agents gave him during the last Trump presidential campaign? That's next with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Investigative reporting by MS Now's Carol Leonnig and Ken Delanian broke the news in September of last year that Donald Trump's so-called border czar, Tom Homan, who serves in a position invented by Donald Trump that does not require Senate confirmation, was recorded on an FBI undercover video accepting $50,000 in cash from undercover FBI agents in the last year, the year before Donald Trump became president. When that news broke, Tom Homan disappeared from Sunday morning TV, where he might be asked a difficult question about the $50,000 in cash. But this Sunday, on Meet the Press, at the end of an interview about other issues, Kristen Welker followed the money.
As you know, in an undercover operation in 2024, the FBI recorded you accepting a bag which was determined to contain $50,000 from agents posing as business executives who said you indicated you could help win government contracts in the second Trump administration. I want to stress there was an investigation. It was closed last year. The Justice Department said it found, quote, no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. I do want to give you an opportunity to respond, though, Mr. Homan. Where is that $50,000? Did you keep it or did you return it?
I didn't take $50,000 from anybody, and that's a question for the FBI. I'm not going to give this story any more air. Bottom line, I did nothing illegal. I did nothing, and the FBI and DOJ reviewed this. No credible evidence I did anything, because I didn't do anything illegal.
But was there $50,000 in the bag, and did you return it?
I'm not giving the story any more air. This is an attack on my integrity and my professionalism. I'm not addressing it.
But
that's a question of the FBI.
Can you address, given that it's been recorded, did you keep the money? Did you return the money?
I did not keep any. $50,000 is ridiculous. The FBI has been clearing this, and it irritates me. This story keeps going on and on and on, even though I've been found to do nothing inappropriate. So I'm not going to ask any more of these questions.
But just a bit, did you return the money?
I didn't have any money to return.
Okay.
I didn't take the $50,000, bottom line.
Let me ask you, you're saying you did nothing unlawful. Would you be comfortable with the FBI releasing the recordings?
That's a decision of the FBI.
But it might be a decision for the FBI, but would you be comfortable if they released
Again, I'm not getting ahead of the FBI in this investigation.
But can you just say, on a personal level, would you be comfortable releasing the recordings?
I am not going to get ahead of the FBI. That's their decision.
Okay. All right. Mr. Homan, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he has been waiting to hear those questions asked for several months now. Senator, let me begin with the question that Mr. Homan refused to answer. Would you be comfortable if the FBI releases those recordings?
I mean, if he says he's done nothing wrong and it's totally everything he did was totally appropriate, why would you not allow those recordings to be released? Why would that be inappropriate? And by the way, when the FBI delivers $50,000 in an operation like this, there's a whole procedure of paperwork and reports that they have to go through to get access to that cash. And they have to then report what became of it. Did they get it back? And so there's an actual federal record through the FBI about this $50,000. And we can't get answers to those questions. We asked Attorney General Bondi about it. We've got a FOIA out about it. These are fairly standard records. And so, when Homan said, these questions, they just go on and on and on and on and on. Well, duh, the reason they keep going on and on and on is because you won't answer where's the $50,000. And between him and the FBI, they know where the $50,000 is. And yet here we are months later, and they still won't answer.
So the great thing about Kristen Welker staying specifically on the $50,000 is she just established the best record yet of what Mr. Homan has to say about the $50,000. And he says, I didn't take $50,000 from anyone. He also says, I didn't return $50,000. Well, one of those answers is provable on video. There is reportedly a video of that guy sitting in a room with undercover FBI agents who are doing an undercover video. And on that video, we will see him take the $50,000. or not take the $50,000? And if he can show a video of him not taking the $50,000, wouldn't they rush to get that video out there?
Yeah. And there's highly likely to be an FBI 302 also, the investigative form that they fill out after an interview or an episode like this, where they come back to the office and they write down what took place. So they've got a contemporaneous record that the tape would then support. So there's a ton of evidence about what actually happened, and the MAGA DOJ just won't let it out because they don't want their guy to be embarrassed.
And it's very clear. This is one of the reasons why Donald Trump had to invent a job that does not require Senate confirmation in order for him to be working in the federal government now.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing that's kind of a riot, if you think about today's recent news and the subpoena to Jay Powell, Jeanine Pirro's explanation for that is because that they weren't getting answers, they weren't getting complete answers, they weren't getting timely answers, and so they had to resort to a subpoena. Well, false, incomplete, and untimely answers is sort of the hallmark of this administration. So the idea that they're aggravated by false, incomplete, or untimely answers, I mean, the irony is rich. And this guy is the perfect example of false, incomplete, or untimely answers.
And clearly his game was he was going to stay off TV long enough for this to cool down. But Kristen Welker didn't see it that way. And the record is now lucky because of her persistence on that. And it comes down to a very simple, provable thing with the video. There's a video that will show him taking the money or not taking the money. And it seems to me, if the Democrats win the Senate next year and you have more control over this Justice Department, would you at that point have more power to get this video?
Yes, and even more would come through the House Judiciary Committee, because a House Judiciary subpoena doesn't need to go through a filibusterable Senate for enforcement. Whereas, as we saw with our subpoenas to try to get to the bottom of Clarence Thomas's many scandals to Leonard Leo and other people, the Senate Republicans refused to allow the enforcement of the subpoena to proceed through the Senate floor. So we have an additional hurdle in the Senate at getting subpoenas enforced. The House can go right at it. And so one way or the other, whether it's a Chairman Raskin or potentially a Chairman Whitehouse in the Senate Judiciary Committee, this is going to come out sooner or later. But, you know, I think their hope is by then they're gone and, you know, getting paid by somebody else, and that's the end of it. All they need to do is get through this moment. But I think it's going to come out, and it just has to.
Chairman to be Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, the Democrats now have a strong chance to win control of the United States Senate in this year's election and make Sheldon Whitehouse the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And Donald Trump is now doing everything he can to help the Democrats. That's next with Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, who is running for re-election this year. With the announcement yesterday of a strong Democratic candidate running for Senate in Alaska, the Democrats now have a much stronger chance of winning control of the United States Senate in November's election. And Donald Trump is doing everything he can to help the Democrats, as he did today in his speech to rich people at the Detroit Economic Club, mocking affordability.
In the coming weeks, I will be laying out even more plans to help bring back affordability. And again, remember, that's a fake word by Democrats. Prices were too high. They caused the high price. They never want to talk about affordability. They always go, this is an election about affordability. I say, they caused it. But they're good at that stuff.
Donald Trump's speechwriters write the mandatory line about affordability. They put it in the teleprompter, and when he sees the word, he has to stop reading the teleprompter to tell his audience that it's a fake word invented by Democrats, and then he says they're good at that. Democrats are now good at talking about the affordability issue throughout the country. And here is what the new Democratic candidate for Senate in Alaska, former Congresswoman Mary Peltola, said about it in her announcement video.
It's not just that politicians in D.C. don't care that we're paying $17 a gallon for milk in rural Alaska. They don't even believe us.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports, quote, this time last year, U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff was considered to be the Democratic Party's likeliest casualty on the 2026 Senate map. Now, Georgia Democrats increasingly are confident of the first-term lawmakers' midterm chances, and Republicans are the ones sounding pessimistic. A growing chorus of prominent Republicans is warning that without a course correction, the party risks disastrous midterm losses and another 6 years for Ossoff. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff from Georgia. He's a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Senate Rules Committee. He's running for re-election this year. Senator Ossoff, your candidacy now is suffering from what I know candidates like you worry about, and that is other people's confidence that you are going to win. But I think you have to recognize what we are seeing nationwide here on the issues, what we've seen in the elections this year. And now when we see a strong Democratic candidate emerging in Alaska, not only is there some confidence that you're going to win, but there is a building possibility toward confidence that the Democrats could win back the Senate.
Lawrence, thank you for having me. And here's how to look at it. We have huge momentum because this president and his agenda and his enablers in Congress are massively unpopular. They have been stripping the country bare and selling the spare parts to enrich themselves and their wealthy donors. People are hurting. People are hurting because their health insurance premiums are skyrocketing. People are hurting because wage growth has stalled. People are hurting because the tariffs are a disaster. People are hurting because prices keep getting higher and higher. But complacency and overconfidence are our enemies. We cannot, just because we had some good results in Virginia and New Jersey, take anything for granted. Remember, I'm the only Democratic senator defending a seat in a state that the president won. They will spend hundreds of millions of dollars. They will use every dirty trick in the book. And so if you are furious at the weekly Watergate and the daily desecration of our nation's highest ideals, I need your help. Here's something you can do right now that makes a difference. Go to electjon.com, electjon.com, and help me win this Senate race in Georgia.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution is reporting 190,000 enrollees in the Affordable Care Act in Georgia alone apparently have lost their health insurance at this point in the year because of the Republican refusal to extend the subsidies that those people were enjoying and that enabled them to even afford health insurance.
And this is exactly what was predicted and just the beginning. You know, this is folks in Georgia and across the country who don't have health insurance anymore. Some of them in the middle of a cancer fight, some of them fighting diabetes, some of them already with surgery scheduled. I'm hearing from my constituents who are in this position every single day. Their premiums have gone up 100, 200%, and folks just can't afford it. It is avoidable human suffering and illness and even death that's being imposed upon the country by Republican politicians and the White House here in Washington. And by the way, all three of my opponents oppose extending these ACA tax credits. Now, my prediction, as the pain grows, as the suffering becomes clearer and clearer, all three of my opponents will reverse their opposition to extending these tax credits. And a lot of Republicans in Congress will change their tune too, but too late to prevent so much of the harm that's already been done.
We've seen that in the House of Representatives, where Republicans who voted to inflict this harm are now trying, some of them now trying to vote their way out of that problem. What is your reaction when you see Donald Trump stumble over the word affordability every single time the speechwriters put it in the teleprompter for him? Every single time he has to say it's a fake word, that you Democrats got together and invented some fake word to describe what Americans are facing now.
He doesn't care what working class and middle class Americans are going through, and he doesn't know. There are some folks in the White House who recognize this as a political liability for him and are trying to get him to at least pay lip service to it. But what does Donald Trump care about above all? Donald Trump cares about retribution. Donald Trump cares about harassing and persecuting and punishing the people he believes to be his enemies and using the powers of state in order to manipulate people, whether it's Jay Powell or members of the Senate he doesn't like, or others who he views as his adversaries.
Senator Jon Ossoff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, the pressure Congressman Ro Khanna is putting on the Trump Justice Department about the Epstein files is working. Today, a federal judge is demanding answers from the Trump Justice Department. Congressman Khanna joins us next. As of tonight, the Donald Trump-controlled Justice Department has released less than 1% of the Epstein files. The department was required to release by law 25 days ago. Today, U.S. District Judge Paul Engelmeyer, who presided over the criminal cases against Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, ordered the Trump Justice Department to explain by Friday why they have released so little of the Epstein material. The order also directs the Trump Justice Department to respond to Congressman Ro Khanna and Congressman Thomas Massie, who are asking the judge to appoint a special master or an independent monitor to oversee the release of the entire Epstein files. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton have refused to comply with subpoenas to testify to the House Oversight Committee. The New York Times is reporting that committee chairman, Republican James Comer, quote, said he would take steps to hold them in contempt of Congress. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Khanna, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You have gotten the judge's attention, and he wants answers by Friday. What are you expecting to hear from the Trump Justice Department?
Well, we were very pleased that Judge Engelmeyer issued the order today, just 2 days after we sent the letter. He was very clear. He expects the Department of Justice to explain why they are hiding the documents they are and what their plan is to be in compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act. He's also seriously considering appointing a special master who would review all the documents, and he's asked the Department of Justice to brief that issue. He's asked Thomas Massie and I to brief that issue, which we will be doing, and our brief will be due in the next couple weeks.
And the speed of a judge's response in a situation like this indicates that this judge thinks this is a very valid point, at least. It doesn't tell us which way he's going to go, but it certainly tells us that he thinks this is valid and important.
Absolutely, Lawrence. Look, he could have just ignored this. He's under no obligation to respond. He could have sat on it. He, within 24 hours, says, I'm going to seriously consider this. I want to hear the arguments. I want to make sure that the Epstein Transparency Act is being complied with. Department of Justice, tell me what your plan is. Tell me whether this is a good idea or not. And he's even graciously given Representative Massie and I the opportunity to make our case. So far, he's conducted himself with great integrity and fairness. And I do believe that he can really help solve this issue. He can appoint someone who finally gets the files out, and he can also direct the type of files we need out, like the Section 302 statements where the survivors have named other rich and powerful men who abused them.
Should Bill and Hillary Clinton comply with the subpoenas to your committee?
Well, they should come before the committee, but their point was, in my view, a fair one. And what they're saying is, one, they want to testify publicly, not behind closed doors. And two, there are all these other people that we should be calling, people who are directly implicated with Epstein, that we should be calling Pam Bondi before the committee, who hasn't complied with the laws. I mean, Bill Clinton was president in 1992, and there are other relevant people. So my understanding is that they're open to coming. They should come, but this cannot become a witch hunt for the Clintons. It needs to be about the survivors and justice.
What are these next steps for you in the committee in terms of the investigation the committee's conducting?
Well, we just got the estate accountant and lawyers subpoena. That was a big deal. I want to credit Ranking Member Garcia and the entire committee for doing that. And so they will be coming before the committee. We're still getting documents from the Epstein estate. And the committee is going to continue to put pressure on the Justice Department. I heard the earlier segment about Chair Whitehouse when we take back the Senate. Well, we're going to have Chair Garcia when we take back the House. And those people in the Justice Department who are not complying are going to face a new oversight committee. And so it is very, very important for people at the Justice Department to understand they have a legal obligation to comply. And this is going to be a huge priority for the oversight committee when we're in the majority.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. All right. And today, Donald Trump made presidential history with his middle finger in response to something an auto worker said to him in a factory today that he apparently did not like. You have seen that video on this network earlier. We will be seeing it also later on this network. That is tonight's last word. Donald Trump, of course, really taking the title Vulgarian in Chief today with his middle finger.